we're going to start off with our first main topic, which is our test of courage final review. Um, I think we should pass the mic over to Liam. Liam, what are your thoughts on test of courage?
Yeah, Test of Courage is a short junior novel by Justina Ireland, and we briefly touched on it last week when we were beginning it, but it is a really, really good book. I personally think it's the best of all the junior novels that Lucasfilm Publishing or Del Rey have put out for the canon. And it's a more character-centric story versus Light of the Jedi. This book follows five main characters: Vernestra Rwoh, Emery Kantaros, Avon Staros, Honesty, I forgot what his last name is, and Avon's droid J6, who are on a ship called the Steady Wing, and it is sabotaged by the Nile, which we know from the beginning of the book, but the characters don't know until the end. Um, and it is eventually they are able to escape. Everybody else on the ship dies, and they are stuck on this planet and have to survive. And it's a great little short story. You can read it very quickly, and it gives us a lot more insight to the mind of young Jedi, young people, I guess, at the time of the High Republic. I found personally Vernestra Rwoh and Emery Kantaros be very compelling characters. Emery, especially, he is very complex in more of the prequel era Jedi terms, where he is pulled to the dark side often by his feelings of rage and anger towards his master getting killed on the Steady Wing. He has to deal with that um, throughout the story, and around him, he only has Jedi Knight Vernestra Rwoh, who is one of the youngest Jedi Knights to ever assume the position and go through the trials. And he's slightly jealous of her because she's just barely older than him, but she's so composed and so calm. And I found their dynamic very, uh, say, strong. Um, it's kind of the Anakin Obi-Wan type of dynamic where one is very emotional and very in tune with who he is and how he's feeling, where the other one is might have kind of assumed responsibility a little younger than she was ready for, and so she's trying to not only lead this group of people but also keep her uh, or this Padawan's emotions in check as they go through this very trying. I highly recommend this book. It's not really the tell-all High Republic novel that's going to really broaden the universe, as we've kind of talked about with Light of the Jedi and a lot of the other books that we hope are coming that really give us a solid ground for this entire universe and the way it works and all the politics and everything. And Light of the Jedi is a great start, but this is also, on the flip side, it's a very personal story that it's very much into the minds of the characters, and each chapter goes into a different character's point of view. And so, yeah, I think if you're looking for a quick read and you want to stay in this High Republic era, this will add something to the era, if I had to guess, by the end of it. Not just with characters, if these characters are mentioned again in other books, but also just for understanding how Jedi, especially Jedi Padawans at the time, are feeling about the trials and about the Nile and the new threat that faces them.
Yeah, I think that's a really great overall summary. I guess great way to sell the book as well. Um, I think if you have like the digital version like I do, it's only 130 pages, and compared to like the 300 something of the what is it, Light of the Jedi, it is a lot more appealing. Just to get a story, a taste of what this whole new High Republic era is about. For myself personally, um, I I don't know. I really did like this story. I know we were discussing like Queen Shadow and other canon novels that had come out at this point, and how while they're great character studies, they don't necessarily add anything. They don't necessarily tell an exciting story. I mean, there are obviously cool things that happen and whatnot, but it's more of like adding a little bit of color and richness to the things that we already know. And, getting this perspective about someone like Vernestra Rwoh, someone like Imri Kantaros, those characters, Avon Staros, from the Star Wars clan that was introduced in uh, the original Star Wars line, where Sana Staros is the fake wife of Han Solo. Um, it's like it allows us to connect these different dots like we have in the current canon, but now we actually get to like really live these characters out, let them breathe, let them be who they are. And like you mentioned, Vernestra Rowe and Emery, I think their dynamic is really great. But I think I want to give special mention to Honesty on Avon. Honesty is just like this. I, I don't want to say like a Luke Skywalker stand-in, but he's definitely someone from a more less technologically dependent planet, much more in tune with just the values of the land and the earth that allows them to grow and thrive as a society. Whereas you see someone like Avon, she's this described as this like this quirky genius. Like you give her pieces of wires and text, and she knows what to do. She's got her own protocol droid J6, who is like a former bodyguard droid, but is also her nanny droid. Like just those complete opposites. It's interesting because she's always analyzing and inspecting everyone around her. She wants to know more about Emery and Vernestra's lightsabers because she just wants to find out what else can these crystals power. And then you see Honesty, who's like, I like guidelines. I like being in these tight rules because that's where I find comfort. That's where I know that things don't go bad. And for them to just be caught up in all these Nile activities, to be on a ship that's sabotaged, where each character at this point is like, not totally sure of themselves, right? They're just starting to become who they are or who they want to be. Um, I mean, that's a great starting off point, but then to see them how they interact, how they try to survive with each other, what are the thoughts in their head that are going on, it's really great. And then going back to Vernestra and Emery, I mean, yeah, Vernestra is 15 and she's a Jedi Knight. I mean, when we look at the prequels, right, we keep on seeing how Padawans are too old, right? Or Luke was too old to be trained, or Anakin was too old to be trained. Emotions, connections, but we never really consider like is someone too young to have reached that final stage, to reach one of the most important aspects of a Jedi's life. And Vernestra is 15, and she's considered like a prodigy in her own way, just like how Avon is with technology. She's like trying to be like a 25-year-old, 30-year-old, but she's also 15. She clearly is like, trying to live up to these lofty expectations, but she's also not trying to be overwhelmed by them. I mean, I think this being a young reader book, we don't really see too much about her struggles because she has to be like the strong person of the group, the one like the guiding voice. But it was nice to know that there's like a character that is relatable in a ways, but also so distant from a lot of people who are reading it because being 15, you're like, okay, this is like an Ahsoka for us. This is someone that you can see all their emotions out loud. You can see how she reacts and deals with different things. But she's not like Ahsoka. She's much more controlled. She's much more in tune with the Force. She's very self-critical, but only because she wants to become better and better. Whereas you see someone like Emery, who's like you mentioned, he's kind of like the prequel Jedi in the way his emotions are kind of swirling, kind of overwhelming of himself. But he's also not someone who's too assured of himself. His lightsaber at some point in the story is not functioning because everything about his connection to the Force and the lightsaber itself feels off. He's overwhelmed by his master's death on the steady wing, where Honesty's father, the ambassador, also dies. Um, and to then pair these two to work together, it's interesting because it could have just been like, all right, we're gonna be both young people here working out, trying to keep everyone else safe. But Imri also has these feelings of jealousy. He's like, how is she so good? We're like the same age. I'm like only a year or two younger. All right, especially near the end when he's like dealing with a lot of his emotions and makes a lot of bad choices that are very akin to Anakin, like in Attack of the Clones and Clone Wars and what is it? Revenge of the Sith. He has someone like Vernestra to, help him remind, like, okay, no, this is, I understand your pain, I understand your feeling, but think about your master, think about all these things. And it's interesting because I know I'm rambling here and all that, but he's a character who, if you put him in the prequels, would have been like Anakin, would have fallen headfirst into his darker emotions, into the dark side. And Vernestra, the way she treats him, she kind of treats him like a Qui-Gon would, uh, or how an Obi-Wan would. But I don't know if those two would have been able to entirely convince him as she did. I think by showing her own strength, by showing her own humility in a way, he remembers like, okay, like this is not who I am. This is I'm just being driven by this pain. I need to really think these things out. And it really reflects the story as a whole. Like these are characters who are trying to survive, but in the process of surviving, realize that all these little things have been adding up. That they realize they haven't been in sync with who they are. They're changing. They don't know who they are. They have past memories and trauma that they have to deal with. And when something suddenly goes bad for all of them at once, it's kind of hard to keep all those things that were already part of you from leaking out. And I think that was what made this story really fun to read.
Yeah, and I want to go back to Emery real quick too, because he gives us such a different perspective than Light of the Jedi does with most of their Jedi, and even Bell, who is, I believe, the only real apprentice we get acquainted with in Light of the Jedi. Excuse me. Emery is the first real fleshed out character in all of the High Republic so far. As we get closer to into the dark, to lean towards the dark side at all. And so we're brought up in this era that's so the Jedi are so powerful and such at the top of their game that we don't have the Sith or any dark Jedi or any type of dark side stuff to go with as the villain for this era, and yet we're still getting stories of Jedi being pulled to the dark. I thought that was fascinating too, because I wonder if that's going to come into play at all anymore. I mean, I'm assuming for Imri as a character it will, but will the dark side be prevalent at all in the future High Republic stories? That wasn't something I was expecting to get at all, really, in the High Republic.
I mean, great points. I think from myself, just adding on to that, it's, I mean, how do I put it? I don't know. It's difficult to look at the Jedi in the light of the Jedi and say that they're flat. I mean, obviously, there's some characters that, because the nature of their stories, they do die early on. We, we're more, connected to their personalities and just their dialogue with other characters as opposed to what they do and what they achieve. So it's hard to like fully embrace those characters to this, really think of them as like, oh, fully fleshed out characters. But they're not flat either. Whereas here in Test of Courage, because it focuses on such a smaller group of people, you know, part of the consequences of this overarching, you know, essentially terrorist plot against the galaxy at this point, that I don't know. I found Vernestra and Emery to be probably some of my favorite Jedi's, and yeah, I really like Bell. I really like Loden Greatstorm. Those guys are equal, or if not even more appealing, because of how much more time we get to spend with them. Um, And I mean, Elzar, man, there's so many Jedi in Light of Jedi. Don't get me wrong, that are fleshed out, really fun to follow, really intriguing already. But you know, their thoughts, their internal dialogue aren't things that are really dived into. They're more used as setups for either their eventual death or they're just used as like moments of respite as opposed to something that is a constant fluctuation that normal people have about who they are, what they're doing, the different thoughts and things that have consequences in life, which is where all these characters shine because they're always thinking about their relationship. They're always thinking about why did this thing happen? How does it make them feel? Um, I guess being a young reader novel, in a way, so it's pretty nice that you can have kids be engaged with those emotions as well. Um, it might be a little less unsubtle than we'd like, but I think it does it. I think the way Justina Ireland writes it, she balances that out really well.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think we would definitely will get more into the personal side of the Force for all those characters that we met in the Light of the Jedi. But yeah, it struck me as very interesting to see their first foray into the dark side as part of a junior novel, as opposed to the first big, huge adult novel that came out. And I'm not sure what the plot of the Dark is. I'm trying to not spoil anything myself before we read
Yeah,
it.
I think Into the Dark is also, just from my glimpses, it's gonna be more of a smaller scale story, kind of like Test of Courage. So it's not gonna be numerous Jedi or big galaxy spanning events. So maybe we'll see a lot more of this sort of thing. Maybe it's not going to be about the dark side necessarily, or like the tinges of dark side, but who knows? I mean, we know that the High Republic also has the Drengir, those plant-like creatures that seem to be connected to the dark side. Those are characters that we still haven't met, so maybe that's what Into the Dark's about. But yeah, I totally see your point.
At this point, there's not like an established Sith order, right?
Um,
Not
no,
in the book.
yeah, not in the books. It hasn't like we know that the High Republic eventually, as it ends, will lead into the Acolyte, that live action TV show that has been
Right, right.
announced. How much is connected to the Sith? If there's a Sith order, those are I don't know. I don't think those are things that we'll know even for a long time, and to what degree. Um, I know there's a character in the High Republic comic, uh, Keeve Trennis, who's the apprentice to the Trandoshan Jedi Master Skier. Um, in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, when we see Jocasta Nu and Obi Wan in the library, they talk about Obi Wan. I don't know if it's in a deleted scene or if it. No, sorry, they talk about Count Dooku. I don't know if it's in a deleted scene or it's in the movie, but they talk about the Lost 20 and how he's part of that. And there's a Jedi named Trennis who is part of that. So maybe she goes towards the dark side. Maybe she leaves the Order or something, or she's killed off, and people assume that she just left. I mean, I don't know. There isn't really much to say about the Sith presence at this point, other than like, oh, even like the characters in this book are like, it's been centuries since you know there were Sith roaming the galaxy.
Yeah, it's like more kind of abstract, right? Like,
They're
Abstract and just like myths, yeah.
yeah,
mm-hmm.
they're alive, but nobody knows they're alive
Gotcha.
right now. So I would assume, and I also would be feeling bad for any of our Jedi characters who met a Sith at this time because that would mean they would probably get killed because no one knows about them. Phantom Menace. Uh, but but yeah, I would think maybe we could lean more into the Sith very much so at the end of all this, but I think for now, the Sith will probably have very little to absolutely no involvement just based on these two books. But we still have four more coming out this year, I think. So who knows? But yeah, I think the Nile they've set the Nile up to be fairly intimidating threat for the Jedi, especially because of their unpredictability and their just sheer numbers and viciousness. So I think for the Jedi at this time, they're depicted as so passive, and until we get into this book, in Light of the Jedi, they're so passive and so feeling in the Force. They're so enveloped in just the way the Force feels around them and the way the Force feels throughout the galaxy. I feel like the Nile could consume all of their attention, or maybe we could get something about the Sith later. We're acting behind the scenes behind Nile Jedi conflict. That could be interesting, but I don't think that's going to be a part of the main series.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is all just theorizing from us, right? We have bits and clues. Um, Obviously, we also have desires and wants for what the High Republic will eventually shape up to be. But yeah, I mean, regardless, I think we can definitely say Test of Courage is a really, really strong second book to dive into after the Light of the Jedi. I guess a big talking point that comes out of this book um, is less about the big plot that comes around it, but I think for me, what's interesting is Vernestra is now master to Imri. If I got that correct, right?
Yeah, she takes him as her apprentice and at the very end.
Which is really, really interesting of dynamic to set up because we know that Vernestra is going to be in Out of the Shadows. Um, but yeah, I don't know how much Imri is going to be part of that story now. I don't know what her role in the story is, but I know that she's on the cover and she appears to be one of the bigger Jedi in the story. And I mean, let's be real, a 15-year-old training like a 14-year-old, like that, people, I think, fairly said that, like, Anakin and Obi-Wan was like already pretty close in age, but then Anakin and Ahsoka's even closer to age. And I mean, Anakin does not have very mature tendencies in the Clone Wars, and he rubs off so much on Ahsoka till until she finally reaches her breaking point, and then she, obviously makes her own life choices and follows her own path. Not entirely of her will, obviously, but still. But now to have characters that are like only years apart, right? Like 1 or 2 years apart. That's I don't know. I don't know what you think about that, Liam. I don't know how that. I don't know how that. I'm interested. I'm excited for it, but I don't know how that dynamic's gonna work out.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that too because I think one of the things that goes wrong between Anakin and Obi-Wan is Obi-Wan doesn't really try to act his age. He doesn't try to relate to Anakin. He tries to be Qui-Gon Jinn. And I think if Obi-Wan was more himself, which he is later once Anakin is old enough to kind of be an equal to him, but when Anakin's young, I don't think he really tries to relate because he's trying so hard to be a replacement to Qui-Gon Jinn that he kind of doesn't create his own identity for Anakin. But what Anakin does well with Ahsoka is he's just Anakin, and I think that rubs off well on Ahsoka, even if she starts to do some things that most Jedi would consider questionable. But I think with this, it'll be interesting because Vernestra definitely has more of that Obi-Wan Qui-Gon feel, where she's more stoic. She's not very emotional, especially for being someone so young. And so, seeing if she tries to relate to Imri will be the most interesting part because she and Imri, I think there's definitely going to be that jealousy complex still going throughout their relationship, especially because they in this book they duel and she beats him, and he not only is he jealous of her being slightly older than him and already a Jedi Knight, but she's defeated him in combat and basically proved that she's better than him in almost every way of being a Jedi. So I think that's going to constantly plague their relationship, and I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't go well. But I think at the same time, if she tries to come to his level and tries not to be holier than thou and tries to relate to him, I think it could prove to be a good match because they are kind of experiencing the same things emotionally at their ages.
Yeah, totally. I mean, she is. I don't know if repressed is the right word, but she's very much holding a lot of things about herself at bay. Um, I know, like, one interaction that really stood out to me was when she described that in her dream, she was like persuaded to, uh, how do I put it? Like, persuaded to just suddenly make adjustments to her lightsaber, and to make it into a light whip, kind of like Lumia's. But from what it's been described, it seems more like the handle is still like a lightsaber, but the blade itself moves like a light whip. But anyways, when she brings that up to Emery, because she has to, because she's like, okay, this makes this process of getting to safety a lot easier. His first thoughts go to like the Night Sisters and all that, and she kind of defends herself, and he has to respect her on that because he is still the Padawan. He is still, you know, he is still the one who is the second command at best in this situation. And I mean, even like just a discussion about like what's right or wrong, right, makes him consider like his darker emotions, his feelings, which is I think something that Vernestra is gonna have to really like work on. Like, what is she allowed to say, right, versus what does she need to say? She seems to be someone who's preoccupied with expectations and righteousness so much that she doesn't necessarily question her own actions too much. She doesn't really question her dream for getting the light whip. And more so than that, she is a child prodigy, right? Anakin was a child prodigy, but Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship and the Council's own fears forced him to be in an apprenticeship for 10 years. Whereas, I mean, you look at like Ahsoka and Anakin, she's basically a Jedi Knight by the end of the war in a few years. And a lot of that, I think, as bad of an influence as Anakin can be, she was also just that talented herself, and a lot of the good qualities about Anakin rubbed off on her. But when it comes to Vernestra and Imri, right, it's like I think of like child prodigies who like go to college when they're 12 or 13. Yeah, they know everything that people like 5, 6, 7 years older than them know, but they don't adjust socially. All right, it's almost like the climb towards the prodigy is almost their peak in their life, because once they start aging and everyone kind of reaches the same level, then what are they really like? What are what is their position in life? I think some of those thoughts might be accelerated by taking on a Padawan, because that's not something a normal 15-year-old Jedi Knight does, and there aren't many normal 15-year-old Jedi Knights, I think, throughout Star Wars history.
Yeah, I was that. That's kind of why I brought up the whole Sith order point. But I guess I was more commenting toward like the dark side, because yeah, I feel like these characters are being set up to be impressionable, and like even if they are masters at 15, I feel like that is more of the reason for you to be susceptible to like shifting, and so I guess that's what my theory was on like where this or where Ernesto's arc would go, or Emiri's, or something like that.
And I think it very well could be, because there is one of the things with Anakin was the expectations around him being the chosen one, and everybody knowing that he's the chosen one, the way they
Right.
look at him differently. And Vernestra seems to have those expectations on her, and then also Emery. Nobody expects him to be this great Jedi, but he seems to have such high expectations of himself. And he talks about, I think, in the book, about being taller than most of the Padawans and or the young lady. He has these physical traits that he feels should make him stronger, but he's not as strong as he wants to be, and so he sets expectations for himself, while the Order seems to have set expectations for Vernestra, and both of them are kind of challenged with how to meet those expectations. I think that could be something that both unites them and maybe makes them very different Jedi, but it could also, like you said, lead them to the dark path.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of criticisms online from people who haven't read the book who are like, oh, instantly, like, it's a 15-year-old girl who's a Jedi Knight, right? It's even worse than Rey. It's even worse than Anakin, which is like, first of all, read the book. They're much more three-dimensional, fleshed out characters than you're trying to write them off to be. But yeah, I mean, what sort of Jedi will she be? Being 15 as a Jedi Knight doesn't mean she's going to be a master when she's 18. I think a lot of her journey as a Jedi Knight. I mean, when we look at Elzar Mann, he's clearly a capable Jedi in the Light of Jedi, and he's closely aligned with Stellan Gios, who's a Jedi Master, and Avar Kriss, who's a Jedi Master. So how come he doesn't? Well, he's a bit more experimental. He kind of tweaks around with how he uses the Force, but he's also much older and mature, and not necessarily as reckless as someone who half his age would be. So in what way will Vernestra change, right, in her process of becoming a Jedi? Because I think, as you mentioned before, Liam, like maybe the beginnings of Anakin's and Obi-Wan's relationship, especially how like Obi-Wan carried throughout the episode 2 until Geonosis, obviously. He was using Qui-Gon's lightsaber, you know, he's he gets the long hair, he gets the beard like Qui-Gon. He visually and physically tries to be like Qui-Gon as much as he can be. He tries to lecture him as Qui-Gon lectured Obi-Wan in the past. I mean, yeah, he is trying to be all those things, but then as the war goes on, as Anakin trains Ahsoka, as Return of the Jedi shows up, it's clear that he's also like learned to be himself. Basically, he's learned to become the negotiator. He's learned to, balance his old feelings with Satine, with his loyalty to the Republic. He's learned to, let Anakin have leeway in his life and support him no matter what because it makes him happy. There's a lot of different things that just come with living a life, and I'm very curious to see just how much life of Vernestra's that we follow and how much of Imri's do we follow. Right now they're Jedi Knight and Jedi Padawan paired together in Master and Apprentice role, but since High Republic goes on for so long, how do they break apart? How do they change in their relationship? There's so much possibility with this that I think I understand why they put two very young characters with two very strangely different power dynamics together, because they're still relatable, but that relatability only takes them so far, and now there's so much more opportunity for their dynamic to change, to see how the Jedi around them change because of their relationship and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think this is a testament to, like we said last week, the High Republic Initiative. And it's the fact that you can read this story, and while it might not, the events in this might not really have much importance on the grander scheme, they're really good characters and they're fleshed out well, and they're fun to read. And I think for a short little story that's not going to take you that much time to get into, if anybody's listening is hesitant or just even slightly interested about reading the Verge, I'd highly recommend it. I don't think you're not going to get as compelling of a story as you would in one of these more adult novels, but if you're looking for something that's going to take you 4 hours at most probably to read, this is a great place to go. Thanks so much for watching this segment of the Star Wars Lads podcast. If you enjoyed this content, please like the video by clicking the thumbs up button down below and subscribe to our channel for new Star Wars content every single week. If you want to watch our full discussion, click the video on the left. Or if you want to check out one of our other awesome videos, click the video on the right.